Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Why did the Supreme Court release Miss Kavitha in a money laundering case on bail? Will United States and Iran come together to renegotiate the Iranian nuclear deal? Why was the Telegram founder arrested? What is happening in Balochistan in Pakistan? Important facts related to Kachativu Island. Himachal Pradesh becomes the first state to increase the minimum age of marriage for women from 18 to 21. What about the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet? These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. Every morning at 10, we go live and present the Hindu newspaper analysis without fail. If you appreciate the quality of content that we deliver on this platform, if you're satisfied with the daily newspaper analysis and other set of videos that we release on this channel, please let us know in the comment section. Also, do not forget to press the like button, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and share the links of these classes with your friends and fellow aspirants. And before we start, one announcement: our Liberty batch, which is the last batch for CSE 2025, starts tomorrow, 29th of August. Should you wish to enroll in this batch, do that today by using this code IAS English, because once you use this code, you will get 12 months of subscription at less than 25K, plus you will get 3 months extra free extension on this subscription, which means in total 15 months subscription at 25K, less than 25K, if you wish to enroll in our Liberty batch. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, and let's look at topic number 1 on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu. There is something called Delhi Excise Policy, also known as the Delhi Excise Policy Scam. Couple of years ago, the Delhi government announced a policy where they allowed private players to set up or to apply for liquor shops in Delhi. The Delhi government said that we will slowly withdraw, the government will withdraw from the liquor business, allow private players to set up liquor business, liquor shops, which will increase and enhance the experience of the customers, and at the same time it will fetch 9,500 crores worth of revenue for the Delhi government. Then the allegation was made that there is a scam here, there is a corruption here, and in this corruption there is one South body which is involved. South body, of which Miss Kavitha is an important member according to the Enforcement Directorate. They have paid advance bribe of 100 crores to various ministers and the officers of the Aam Aadmi Party so that they tweak this policy, allow private players, and ultimately benefit private players, and the biggest loser will be the exchequer, will be the government, will be the people of Delhi. This was later on taken up by Enforcement Directorate, because this is a classic example of money laundering, and to invoke Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2002, Enforcement Directorate carried out investigation. The Delhi Chief Minister, the Delhi Deputy Chief Minister, other minister and some important members were arrested. So was Miss Kavitha. In case of Mr. Kejriwal, the Enforcement Directorate invoked something called vicarious liability. What is this vicarious liability? For example, you have a pet and the pet bites an individual. You can't say, I'm not responsible. It's my pet who has done this. You have to take the responsibility of your pet. Similarly, if the Aam Aadmi Party has taken a decision or the government has taken a decision, and the government is headed by the Chief Minister, and this Chief Minister is also the convener of the Aam Aadmi Party, Because this 100 crore worth of bribe, it was given to Aam Aadmi Party to contest Goa elections according to Enforcement Directorate. So Mr. Kejriwal, as the Chief Minister, because his cabinet took this decision, as the convener of the Aam Aadmi Party, because the beneficiary of this corruption is the Aam Aadmi Party, so vicarious liability rests on Mr. Kejriwal. So Mr. Kejriwal is responsible for the actions of his cabinet, the actions of his political party, and ultimately he was arrested. But in money laundering cases, bail can also be given, although it is very difficult to obtain bail in money laundering cases. And to get bail, you have to satisfy a very stringent twin test under Section 45 of the Prevention of the Money Laundering Act. And what is the Section 45 of the Prevention of the Money Laundering Act? Whenever you will apply for bail, if you're accused in money laundering, the court, before deciding whether you will be released on bail or not, will have to hear the prosecution, will have to hear the lawyers of the Enforcement Directorate. That's number one. Number two, but the court can release you on bail provided this twin test is satisfied. Test number one, if the court is satisfied that you are not guilty, if prima facie there is sufficient evidence that you put in place to convince the court that you are not guilty. And second, if the court is convinced that you will not commit any other offense when you are released on bail. For example, a student and his father came to me and complained about his son, that my son is using smartphone primarily to watch Netflix. I am going to snatch phone from him. Now I am trying to convince the father that don't snatch the phone because it's not going to help. He can use the phone to watch the YouTube content, the daily newspaper analysis as well. But the father says, you take the guarantee that my son will not use the smartphone to watch movies on Netflix. Now why would I take the guarantee on behalf of your son? Similarly, why will a judge take it upon himself to say that you will not commit any other offense when you are released on bail? So the bar to grant the bail is very high. That means it becomes very difficult for an accused to get bail in Prevention of Money Laundering Act cases. And condition number two, the court is to be satisfied that you are not guilty, you are innocent. That normally the court gets to know at the end of the trial. When the trial is completed, defense has given its argument, prosecution has given the argument, then the court will be satisfied by hearing arguments on all sides and ultimately decide whether you are guilty or innocent. But that happens at the end of the trial. Here, even for getting the bail, at the start of the trial maybe before the trial as well, how can you convince the judge that you are innocent? That is why the bar to get bail is very difficult in the PMLA cases. But there is also an exception. The courts, at their discretion, can grant bail to an accused even without satisfying this twin test. If the accused is 16 years or less, that means the accused is a minor, the accused is sick or infirm, and the accused is a woman. Now the courts at their discretion can grant bail to an accused who is accused in PMLA cases, provided the accused is less than 16 years of age, minor, the accused is aged, infirm, sick, and at the same time the accused is a woman. When this bail application of Miss Kavitha reached the Delhi High Court rejected it, saying Miss Kavitha is a woman, but she is not vulnerable. She is not household lady. She is an educated woman. She is a member of the Legislative Council. So she is not an ordinary woman because she is not vulnerable. She is not a household lady taking care of the household chores. She is an educated lady. She has been the member of the Legislative Council. So she is not an ordinary woman. She is not a vulnerable woman, and that is why we will not grant her the bail. When Ms. Kavitha approached the Supreme Court wondered that the reasoning given by the Delhi High Court judge is fantastic. Are you going to classify women into different categories? Is that something which is allowed by the Constitution? Is that something which is allowed by the law? How can you classify women into vulnerable and less vulnerable? Does that mean that no educated women should be granted bail under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act? Woman is a woman, so you can't classify women further. And ultimately granted bail to Ms. Kavitha. The prosecution had argued that Ms. Kavitha is not an ordinary woman because she might tamper with the evidence. Because even if a woman is to be granted bail, but even then she should be subjected to further restrictions. In a sense, she should not be at flight risk. If we release her on bail, she will take a flight and leave this country and become another Mr. Lalit Modi or Mr. Vijay Mallya and others, Mehul Choksey and others. She should not be at flight risk, and at the same time she should not tamper with the evidence. The Enforcement Directorate argued that there was one key witness in this case, a businessman from Hyderabad, who had given a statement incriminating Ms. Kavitha, and now this businessman has withdrawn, has retracted from his statement, which basically means that Ms. Kavitha has imposed, has tampered with the evidence, has threatened the witness, and has tried to misguide the prosecution. The Supreme Court argued and asked, how can Ms. Kavitha, who was in ED custody, tamper with the evidence by forcing this businessman to retract from the evidence, to retract from the statement when he himself was in the ED custody? So all these arguments fell flat, and ultimately Ms. Kavitha was released on bail in this PMLA case. Long story short, an accused by the Enforcement Directorate in prevention of money laundering cases, you can get bail, but for that you have to meet twin test, stringent twin test. One, the courts can release you on bail if the courts think that you are not guilty. If the judge thinks that while you are on bail, you will not commit any offense. But even then there is an exception for minors less than the age of 16, for aged, sick, infirm, for women as well. When this bail application reached the Delhi High Court said she is not an ordinary woman because she is educated, she is not a household lady, she is not vulnerable, she has been the member of the Legislative Council, and as such she is not entitled to bail. But Supreme Court, when this matter was heard by the Supreme Court called the reasoning given by the Delhi High Court as fantastic, saying by this logic no educated woman is entitled for bail. And as such, Ms. Kavitha was released on bail and she got out of the prison. That's what you need to understand from this particular topic. Let's look at another topic. Khamenei opens door for discussions with US over Iran's nuclear program. Let's try and understand this newspaper article in great detail. There is Iranian nuclear deal which is known as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was signed between Iran, permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council, which is United States, United Kingdom, France, China, Russia, plus Germany, because Germany is not the permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Members of the European Union also participated in these discussions, and ultimately this Iranian nuclear deal or what is also known as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was signed in 2015. It was enforced from 2016, and it was unilaterally withdrawn by the United States in the year 2018. Why? Listen to me carefully. In 1979 or till 1979, United States and Iran, they were close friends. Because then the Shah of Iran, he was considered to be an ally of United States. The Pahlavi dynasty, the last Shah of Iran, were very close to United States. Then came 1979 Iranian Revolution or Islamic Revolution in Iran, and ultimately Aga Ruhollah Khamenei or Khamenei became the supreme leader of Iran. Islamic Revolution took place, the Pahlavi dynasty ended, the Shah of Iran was deposed, and Islamic Revolution took birth in Iran. And at that time also, some hostages were also taken. Some US citizens were taken hostages in Iran for a couple of years. On that, a beautiful Oscar award-winning movie, Argo, was directed by Ben Affleck. But the point is, this is when the relationship between United States and Iran deteriorated. And since then, sanctions have been imposed on Iran. These sanctions were further imposed when the world thought that Iran is manufacturing a nuclear weapon or is very close to manufacturing a nuclear weapon. And if that happens, that will tilt the balance of power in the Middle East. If you look at United States, or for that matter India, or for that matter Pakistan, what is our nuclear status policy? We have openly proclaimed that we are nuclear power states. We have tested nuclear weapons. But what about Israel? Its nuclear status is ambivalent. If you ask Israel, do you have nuclear weapons? They will neither say yes, nor will they deny it. So their policy on nuclear matters is ambivalent. But the world knows that Israel in this area has nuclear weapons. And if Iran also, which is the neighbor, also develops nuclear weapon, it is going to be very difficult situation in Middle East. And there is Shia-Sunni rivalry in Middle East as well. The Sunni bloc led by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia said, we should have been consulted when this Iran nuclear deal was signed. We were not consulted and we oppose it. Israel, right from the start, was opposing this Iranian nuclear deal or Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. But what was the contours of this Iranian nuclear deal? If we look at uranium, uranium needs to be enriched in centrifuges, because what you have to do, you have to ensure that you enrich the naturally available uranium to ensure that it is more made up of uranium-235, and that is how it can be used for manufacturing nuclear weapons. If you enrich uranium up to 5%, that is used as a fuel for nuclear power plants. That's something that you would know. If you enrich uranium up to 20%, for example, that can be used for research purposes. But if this uranium is enriched 90% or above, it can be used for developing a nuclear weapon. That is what we call weapons grade nuclear enrichment or uranium enrichment. It is difficult to enrich uranium up to 5%. Than it is to enrich uranium from 5% to 90%. Why was the world adamant on striking this deal with Iran? Because experts said, if we will not have a deal with Iran, Iran is months away from manufacturing a nuclear weapon. But if we sign a nuclear deal with Iran, Iran will be a year away from manufacturing a nuclear weapon. So what difference does it make? It makes a difference, because right now you are months away from manufacturing and testing a nuclear weapon. And with the deal, you are a year away, because this 1 year will give opportunity, will give time to the world leaders to respond to the situation. Sanctions were imposed on Iran, which crippled her economy. If you look at their airline industry, it is in dire straits because they're not getting the parts, refurbished parts, to refurbish their airplanes. Thousands of crores of dollars have been confiscated of Iran in various different countries of the world. There were sanctions imposed on the export of oil from Iran. And such sanctions were imposed that India also succumbed to the pressure and decided to stop import of oil from Iran. So these sanctions crippled Iran. So Iran wanted to get out of these sanctions regime. World also has another intention, that we want to stop Iran from making a nuclear bomb. Iran said, you withdraw these sanctions and we will give up our nuclear policy, nuclear plans of developing a nuclear weapon. In 2011, Mr. Hassan Rouhani, who was considered to be a moderate, he became the president of Iran. And that is how he started negotiating with West, with US and other world powers to strike a nuclear deal. And when this nuclear deal was signed in 2015, then it was enforced in 2016. What was the agenda of this nuclear deal? That there will be limit on the number of centrifuges that Iran will have. Iran will have to ensure that they will have a limit on low enriched uranium. What is the amount of low enriched uranium that it can stockpile? You have nuclear power plants at Natanz, Fordo, Iraq. And Iran said, we will use these nuclear power plants only for civilian purposes, only for power generation purposes, not for manufacturing weapons. Even then, the critics were against this nuclear deal. Why? Because this deal had something which was known as the sunset clause. What is the sunset clause? That means there will be a limit to the number of centrifuges that Iran will have, but that limit will be only for 10 years. After that, there won't be any limit. There will be a limit on the amount of low enriched uranium that you can stockpile, but this limit will be available only for 15 years. After that, there will be no limit. Israel and other world powers, including Donald Trump, who later on became the president of the United States, he said that these sunset clauses ensure that we are only delaying manufacturing of a nuclear weapon for Iran. So we delay it, but they can always manufacture a nuclear weapon because of the sunset clause. And if we delay it, then what will Iran get? Sanctions will be revoked, and Iran will be using these revoked sanctions and the benefits from these revoked sanctions to support terrorism in the Middle East. They will have now enough money to support Hezbollah in Lebanon, enough money to support Houthis in Yemen, enough money to support Hamas in Gaza, enough money to support Bashar al-Assad in Syria. So you are basically revoking sanctions in favor of Iran. And what Iran gets a breather. Their economy will be revived. No further sanctions on their oil exports will take place, but at the same time, they will be very close to manufacturing a nuclear weapon, because all we are doing through this nuclear deal is to delay the manufacturing of a weapon, not end it altogether. But there were other world powers who said that right now, Iran is months away from testing a nuclear weapon. With this deal, it will have to discard those enriched uranium, the weapons grade enriched uranium, and ultimately it will take a year for Iran to manufacture a nuclear weapon, which gives us enough time to impose further sanctions on Iran. But then in 2018, Donald Trump withdrew United States from this Iranian nuclear deal, and since then there have been talks whether other world powers, excluding United States, will renegotiate Iranian nuclear deal with Iran. But then came hardliners in Iran as well, who said no further talks with the West on Iranian nuclear deal, because it is the West which withdrew, it is the United States which withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal. Then some assassinations happened. Qasem Soleimani, one of the topmost commanders of the Iran, he was assassinated, allegedly by United States. Natanz, a nuclear power plant, one facility was destroyed, and Iran said this was done by the drone attacks from Israel. A top Iranian scientist, nuclear scientist, was also assassinated. Iran had said that we will give IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, complete access, that you visit our nuclear power plants and check whether we have weapons grade uranium enriched in our nuclear power plants, or we have 3 to 5% enriched uranium. So there were countries which said that Iran initially responded and reciprocated and gave access to the inspectors of IAEA. But later on, it was found that when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated, when a facility at Natanz was attacked, when an Iranian nuclear scientist was assassinated, allegedly by Israel, then Iran, Supreme Commander of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, said that we will not give up on our nuclear policy. And then IAEA inspectors found uranium particles enriched till 87% in Iran. Even if in Iran there are elections and we have a new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, because the previous president died in the airplane crash, even if they have the president, they have some sort of elections which take place, but even then the real power, the controller, is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And now he seems to have given a green signal that we can negotiate even with the enemy. There is no harm engaging with the enemy, according to them, United States. But you should not trust them. Don't place high hopes in them. So this has reignited a larger debate that maybe Iran and other world countries will come together and renegotiate this joint comprehensive plan of action. That is what makes this topic very, very important and significant, and that is what you need to understand from this topic. Let's look at another editorial, coordinated attacks. Something that we discussed yesterday, but I apologize for the quality issues with the audio yesterday. So I will briefly summarize this topic today because there is an important editorial on this. Balochistan, which is resource rich, energy rich, culturally rich as well, is divided amongst three countries. There is a part in Iran, there is a part in Pakistan, and there is a part in Afghanistan. January this year, Iran launched an attack on Pakistan in this Balochistan area. Why? Because Iran said that in this Balochistan area, there were the terrorists of Jaish al-Adl, which is a terrorist organization. And what is the goal and objective of this terrorist organization? That the part of Balochistan which is in Iran, called Sistan Balochistan province, that should be seceded from Iran and should be merged with Pakistan. That is the goal, that is the objective of Jaish al-Adl. And Iran carried out airstrikes against the terrorists of Jaish al-Adl inside Pakistan's Balochistan. And then Pakistan retaliated. And ultimately then good sense prevailed on both the sides and they said no further attacks on each other. There's a part of Balochistan in Pakistan, in Iran, in Afghanistan as well. But one province in Balochistan in Pakistan known as Kalat, In 1947, the ruler of Kalat, the Khan of Kalat, he declared independence and announced the independent state of Balochistan. But then the government of Pakistan persuaded, pressurized, coerced the Khan that you should join Pakistan, and ultimately an instrument of accession was signed, and Balochistan, that part, became part of Pakistan. In Balochistan, you have Gwadar, an important port. A Chinese agency has got the contract to develop and operate this Gwadar port for 40 years. This Gwadar was not always part of Pakistan, was not always part of Balochistan. It was part of the Sultanate of Oman. But then after a series of negotiations with Oman, Pakistan was able to purchase Gwadar in 1958. But be that as it may, the provinces, ethnically rich provinces in West Pakistan, all of them were merged together under a scheme in Pakistan called One Unit Scheme. One Unit Scheme means that the entire power will be concentrated, which is against the principles of federalism, which means there is no distribution of powers between provinces and the center. There is no dual government, one government at the center, one government in the provinces. So ultimately, all these ethnically rich regions of West Pakistan, they were merged together under a one single province in this scheme called One Unit Scheme of 1955. This was not acceptable to people of Balochistan because they wanted autonomy. And that led to insurgency in Balochistan. That led to a series of protests in Balochistan. And ultimately in 1970, this One Unit Scheme was abolished and a provincial government was given to Balochistan. A provincial assembly was given to Balochistan. So some sort of federalism was then implemented with respect to Balochistan and Islamabad. But even then, the final controller was Islamabad. The final controller was the army. Governments were dismissed. The puppet regimes were installed in Balochistan as well as in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area in Pakistan by the Pakistani army, by the establishment. So it is said that in India, the state has the army. In Pakistan, the Pakistani army has the state. So Pakistani army has controlled and dominated Pakistan for much of its existence as an independent country. But be that as it may, this Balochistan area, the people have been protesting, seeking autonomy, not only because they believe in federal principles, also because this area it is accounting for 44% of the entire Pakistan's landmass. It has significant mineral resources, copper, gold, natural gas, coal. Yet it is one of the most impoverished provinces of Pakistan. According to United Nations Development Programme 2018-2019 report, Balochistan accounted for 4.5% of Pakistan's GDP, 14% of the national road network, and 4% of its national electricity consumption. But even then, it is backward. So what is causing resentment in Balochistan? First, they want autonomy. And at the same time, resource-rich area, Balochistan, the people are not getting the benefit of the resources. The benefits are taken by the Punjabis, by the Sindh area of Pakistan. And when they started protesting, there was a security clampdown. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1970s used Air Force, used Army to cut down the dissenting voices in Balochistan. Massive arrests were made. Thousands were killed. And there is a concept of enforced disappearances in Balochistan, where people are made to disappear. According to various reports, 7,000 people have been made to disappear in Balochistan. So there was a movement launched in Balochistan now calling for the secession of Balochistan from Pakistan. We want to liberate Balochistan from Pakistan. But then came the Chinese angle. China started investing heavily in this region because this region is part of CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And China has made strategic investments, invested in airports, invested in mineral extraction, in natural resources extraction in Balochistan area because it is resource rich. A Chinese agency has got the lease of Gwadar port to operate it for 40 years. And look at this Gwadar. It is very close to the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the important shipping routes in this region. So through this, China wants to control important shipment routes of the world. And now came another problem for the Baloch people. They said, one, we are resource rich, but we are not getting the benefit of these resources. And on top of that, we are seeing our demography is also under threat. We see outsiders, Chinese nationals, working in Balochistan, reaping the benefit of our natural resources, and we are still at a disadvantage. So there is a growing anxiety that the province's demography is changing rapidly as non-locals have moved to Balochistan to work on the infrastructure projects. Even the CPEC has not addressed the perception of neglect among the Baloch people. And a massive movement for Balochistan's independence was relaunched by Nawab Akhtar Bukti in 2004. Massive movement was launched. But in 2006, Pakistani army assassinated Nawab Akbar Bukti. And what happened on Monday when there were terrorist strikes, coordinated attacks, that's what this newspaper article talks about. Coordinated attacks amongst different sections, among different parts in Balochistan. It was done on the 18th anniversary of the killing of Nawab Akbar Bukti. And then there is an Indian angle to this as well. Indian angle in the sense, for a long time, Pakistan has been accusing India of fomenting trouble in Balochistan. Saying when people in Balochistan are protesting, there are secessionist elements in Balochistan. They're not doing that on their own. They are being supported by external enemy, and for them the external enemy is India. What made Pakistan to come to this conclusion? Because after the fall of Taliban in Afghanistan, when United States launched its war against terror in 2001, there was a terror strike in United States, 9/11, September 11 attacks in United States, where airplanes were hijacked by Al-Qaeda and then flown into World Trade Center. 2 airplanes hit the World Trade Center. One hit one part of the Pentagon, which is the defense establishment of United States. One plane was moving towards White House, but it was shot down near Pennsylvania. More than 3,000 people lost their lives in these dastardly 9/11 attacks. And then United States launched its war on terror. And that is how the then President George Bush coined this term, axis of evil. So there are some countries which are evil, which are supporting terrorism. One is North Korea, the other is Iran. You have Iraq as well. And Afghanistan was given an opportunity. You hand over Osama bin Laden to us and you will be saved. Otherwise, we will stone you. We will bomb you back to the Stone Age. And Pakistan was also threatened. You have to support us. Either you are with us or against us. And that's how the then President of Pakistan, General Pervez Musharraf, even opened airspace for United States so that using Pakistani air bases, attacks were mounted on Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And after the fall of Taliban in Afghanistan in 2001, 2002, civilian governments which came to power in Afghanistan, they developed good relations with India. Because India and Afghanistan always had shared cordial relations with each other. This was disturbed when Taliban controlled Afghanistan for 5 to 6 years. When Taliban made Kandahar as their capital. And remember IC-814, on which a new movie is being made, has been made. IC-814, Indian Airlines plane, was hijacked and then taken to Kandahar by the hijackers. And in return, we had to exchange 3 dreaded terrorists. So this Afghanistan government, civilian government in Afghanistan and India, they were now becoming closer to each other. In fact, India invested heavily in Afghanistan by funding the new parliament building, by laying down roads as well. So Pakistan thought that since Afghanistan and India are closer to each other, there is a part of Balochistan, part of Afghanistan as well, and there is secessionist tendencies and elements in Balochistan. They are being fueled, supported by India through the government in Afghanistan. And then came a diplomatic blunder when on the sidelines of NAM, Non-Aligned Movement, a summit was to be conducted in Egypt, in a city known as Sharm el-Sheikh. On the sidelines of this meeting, the prime ministers of the two countries, India and Pakistan, Dr. Manmohan Singh and Yusuf Raza Gilani met. And then they released a joint statement. Joint statement is different. If the two leaders are talking to each other personally and then they say whatever they have to say, that's okay. But when they put something on a piece of paper and release it as joint statement, that is significant. And in that joint statement, what was mentioned? Both leaders agreed that the two countries will share real-time, credible and actionable information on any future terrorist threats. Prime Minister Gilani mentioned that Pakistan has some information on threats in Balochistan and other areas, which means this joint statement referred to India and referred to India's alleged support to Baloch rebels in Balochistan. This was criticized by the opposition at that time, but in 2016, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, when Mr. Modi as the Prime Minister addressed the nation on the eve of the Independence Day, he mentioned India's support for the Baloch people. So Balochistan is now a hot potato in international politics as well. But that is what you need to understand from this editorial, which says that if Pakistan is serious about the stability and security in its largest province, it should take measures to address the developmental concerns of the locals, stop the rights violations that take place, and engage with the peaceful civil rights voices to reset ties with the Balochis. That's what you need to understand from this editorial, coordinated attacks. Let's look at another editorial, reasonable limits. This is regarding the arrest of Telegram founder and the chief executive. There is something called free speech. One is freedom of speech, the other is freedom after speech. So you can say whatever you have to say. That's what we call freedom of speech. But your freedom should continue after your speech as well. Because once you have said what you had to say, whether you have criticized the government, whether you have criticized an organization, then the government or these organizations should not take actions against you. And you should be unaffected by their replies. That's what we call freedom after speech. But this freedom of speech and expression cannot be absolute, cannot be without restrictions. There has to be reasonable restrictions. One such reasonable restriction is on the grounds of public order. For example, the oft-cited example that I give. I am inside a multiplex watching a movie, eating popcorn as well. And suddenly I cry, fire, fire, fire. There will be stampede in the multiplex. All the people will be rushing towards the exit. Because I screamed fire, they thought there is fire, they want to save their lives, they run towards the exit, there is a stampede, and unfortunately many people will lose their lives, some will be injured as well. And then the police will come. I'm still eating popcorn, and the police will say, my dear, let me take you to Siberia, you are under arrest. I would say, why? I have the freedom of speech. I can say whatever I have to say. But the police will say there have to be reasonable limits to your free speech. And on the grounds of public order, your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted. So there are 8 reasonable restrictions mentioned under the Constitution of India on the freedom of speech and expression. So your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted on the grounds of sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, contempt of court, defamation, incitement to an offence, morality and decency. These are the 8 reasonable grounds of restriction on your freedom of speech and expression mentioned under the Constitution under Article 19, Clause 2. Not just the Constitution. Even the Universal Declaration of Human Rights say that freedom of speech or free speech is not absolute. There are reasonable restrictions to be imposed on the grounds of public order, on the grounds of morals, on the grounds of public health. Now, who is the founder of Telegram? A Russian entrepreneur, but his base is not Russia, his base is now Dubai. He considers himself to be an absolutist advocate of free speech, saying there should be no limit on free speech. There should be no restriction on the free speech. He would be asked, should there be no restriction on the free speech? Then will you encourage disinformation, misinformation, child pornography, propaganda, unlawful activities, money laundering, smuggling? He would reply and say, privacy is more important than our fear of bad things happening. Privacy is more important. And to be truly free, you should be ready to risk everything for freedom. And that is why he was also celebrated by those who would advocate free speech. There used to be pressure on him that you have to moderate content on Telegram, but he would not do that. There used to be pressure on him that there are some activists, dissidents, who are using your Telegram app, you hand over their details to us. He refused. So there was a time when free speech was advocated by the libertarians, advocated by those who are with liberal values. But now even those who subscribe to right wing, they're also advocating free speech. For example, Elon Musk, who came in support of the founder of Telegram, who was arrested in France. He posted a satirical post wherein he said that in 2030, one person was arrested in Europe for liking a meme. But this editorial says there has to be reasonable limits. Laissez-faire approach to content hosting is not commitment to free speech. What is laissez-faire? In economic terms, we say where the government will not interfere in the free market. What is to be produced, how much it is to be produced, at what cost it is to be produced, the government will not interfere. Similarly, there is a laissez-faire approach to free speech by Telegram, saying what is posted by the followers, what is posted by those who are using this app, we will not moderate, we will not interfere. Why? Because we are advocating free speech. But we need to understand that unlike Signal, which is another app, Telegram is not full end-to-end encrypted. What is this end-to-end encryption? If I use Signal app to communicate with you, what I send you, what you send me, what you receive, what I receive, nobody can read it. Because all these will be encrypted into codes which nobody can read, not even Signal. But Telegram, unlike Signal, is not full end-to-end encrypted. Because there will be some messages. These messages, for example, hate speech, criminal activity, child pornography. Can be read by Telegram and has to be shared with the authorities if they ask for this information. Telegram is not a normal message chat application. You can broadcast your message to up to 2 lakh of your followers or subscribers, which means it is now a social media, not just a messaging app. And every other social media, whether it is Instagram, whether it is Facebook, whether it is X, if the government tells them that you have to take down this post because this post is false, this post is fake, this post is spreading disinformation, this post is child pornographic, they have to take it down. So why can't Telegram take it down either? Now the Telegram founder and those who advocate for him, they say that there is something called safe harbor. For example, what do the followers or what do the users of this app post? Telegram should not be held liable for that. Obviously, you should not be held liable. But if somebody is flagging these concerns that these posts are spreading disinformation, because now messaging apps or social media is also used for spreading disinformation during election campaigns as well. So if you are flagged that this content is child pornographic, this content is spreading disinformation, you should take down this content. You can't say that we have a laissez-faire approach to free content. Free content should be absolute. Free speech should be absolute. And that's what this editorial says. If the investigation in France, the platform is seen to have willfully refused to act upon requests to curb hate speech, disinformation, contents related to criminal activity, then this founder should not escape the long arm of law. For Telegram to remain a free speech absolute and a platform, it must eschew absolutism. It must give up absolutism and ensure that there is content moderation that is put in place on Telegram. Because in the name of free speech, you can't allow child pornography. In the name of free speech, you can't allow disinformation. In the name of free speech, you can't allow hate to go viral in the society. That is what this editorial talks about. And now there are also theories whether Telegram will be banned in India or not, Telegram will be forced to shut or not. But whether that will happen or not, we don't know. But the link to join my Telegram channel is provided in the pinned comment. Please join me should you wish to join my Telegram channel. Now let's look at another article. 8 fishermen from the state of Tamil Nadu held by Sri Lankan Navy, boat impounded. And whenever such news articles occur in the newspapers, everybody seems to be talking about Kachathivu. And some facts related to Kachathivu can be important for your examination. What is this Kachathivu? In Tamil, it means barren. It is a 285-acre of uninhabited spot or speck. And as you can see on the map, it lies northeast of Rameswaram. It lies southwest of Jaffna. The only establishment that you can see on Kachathivu is a Catholic shrine that dates back to 20th century. Kachathivu is an uninhabited speck. Why? Because there is no source of drinking water at Kachathivu. It is argued that this Kachathivu, it was part of the Jaffna kingdom. Although there are some experts, for example, Mr. Jayasinghe, who was the former Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, he said that way back in 1921, or even before that, Colin Campbell, who was the governor of Ceylon. Ceylon then was Sri Lanka. He issued an order that we should demarcate the boundaries of Jaffna. And then when these boundaries of Jaffna were demarcated, Kachativu was not mentioned. Which means there are people who dispute whether Kachativu was at all part of Jaffna kingdom. Long story short, Kachativu, a 285 acre of uninhabited speck, tiny spot, which is northeast of Rameshwaram, southwest of Jaffna. It is an uninhabited place. The only establishment that you can see is a 20th century Catholic shrine. It is argued that it was part of the Jaffna kingdom. Later on, it was argued that it became part of the Ramnath Zamindari. Basically became part of the Madras Presidency. Although there are some experts who dispute that Kachativu was never part of the Jaffna kingdom. Because when Colin Campbell, who was the governor of Ceylon, he asked for the demarcation of the boundaries of Jaffna. In that demarcation, Kachativu was not mentioned, so it was never considered to be part of the Jaffna kingdom. But be that as it may, in 1921, both India as well as Ceylon, Sri Lanka, they both claimed Kachativu is ours. And both India and Ceylon, Sri Lanka, they were the British colonies. But ultimately, this dispute was not resolved. But finally, in 1974, the government of India, Srimati Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. She said that this is an uninhabited place. It holds no significance whatsoever. Plus, it will deepen India-Sri Lanka ties if we give up our claim on Kachativu. And that is how an agreement was signed and Kachativu became part of Sri Lanka. But when this agreement was signed in 1974, Indian fishermen were allowed rights. Indian fishermen were allowed rights. But what are these rights? We don't know. Are these rights basically fishing rights? Can you also fish in the waters of Kachativu? India says yes, because our fishermen are allowed to access the waters of the Kachativu, which means we have the fishing rights. Sri Lankan government says no, not fishing rights. Then what sort of rights? Indian fishermen can rest at Kachativu. Indian fishermen can go and visit the Catholic shrine at Kachativu. Indian fishermen can dry their nets in Kachativu, but they won't have fishing rights. 2 years later, in 1976, India-Sri Lanka, another maritime treaty was signed, wherein both the countries argued that we should stay away from each other's exclusive economic zone. That means we should not let our fishermen enter the exclusive economic zone of each other. Kachativu lies at the periphery of this exclusive economic zone. And ultimately what happens on Kachativu, we don't know. A petition was filed by the then Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Ms. Jayalalitha, that Kachativu was wrongly gifted to Sri Lanka, we want it back. And the political parties in Tamil Nadu, for a long time now, they have been wanting to take Kachativu back. But in 2013, the government told the parliament that Kachativu basically was never part of India and no land was gifted, which means no secession took place. When no secession takes place, that means we have not violated the constitution. Because in Berubari Union case, Supreme Court had said, if you want to gift away a part of your territory, for that a constitutional amendment is required. The government said no secession of territory took place in Kachativu, basically accepting that Kachativu was never part of India. When it was not part of India, there was no question of giving it away to Sri Lanka. That's what you need to understand from this article. Let's look at focus prelims. Satish Kumar named new chairman of the Railway Board. Who approved this appointment? The Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. What is this Appointments Committee of the Cabinet? If you look at Article 77 of the Constitution, or to be more precise, Article 77, Clause 3, the President of India has been given the power that you can make rules for the more convenient transaction of the business of the Government of India. Because all executive powers are vested in the name of the President of India, how will President administer all these executive powers, utilize all these executive powers? For that, rules are to be made. And then utilizing this power under Article 77, Clause 3, Government of India transaction of business rules were made in 1961. And according to these rules, then we have various ministries. Otherwise, Constitution does not talk about Home Ministry, External Affairs Ministry. Constitution only talks about Council of Ministers or Cabinet, Prime Minister. Does not talk about individual ministries. Those individual ministries are dealt by the Transaction of Business Rules 1961. And they also talk about cabinet committees. How many cabinet committees are there? That's the prerogative of the Prime Minister. When Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, there were 13 cabinet committees. When Mr. Modi was the Prime Minister from 2014 to 2019, there used to be 6 cabinet committees. When Mr. Modi came back to power in 2019, 2 more cabinet committees got added. And now in total we have 8 cabinet committees. One such cabinet committee is Appointments Committee of the Cabinet, which is headed by the Prime Minister, and the other member who is part of it is Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Amit Shah. What is the responsibility of this Appointments Committee of the Cabinet? Basically, all appointments of the Joint Secretary or above at the central level, they are approved by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. Who is going to be the Joint Secretary? Who is going to be the Secretary of various departments and ministries at the central level? That appointment is cleared by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. Who is going to be the Chief of the Army Staff, Chief of the Navy Staff, Chief of the Indian Air Force? Decided by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. Who is going to be the Solicitor General of India? Who is going to be the head of the Reserve Bank of India? Who is going to be the chairperson and member of the Railway Board? All these important appointments are cleared by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet, headed by the Prime Minister, and Home Minister is another member. Clear? Let's look at another newspaper article. Himachal makes 21 the minimum age of marriage for women. We have a law called Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2006, according to which child marriages are illegal. Clear? And what is a child marriage? Minimum age for marriage if you are a girl, if you are a boy. If you are a girl, the minimum age is 18. If you are a boy, the minimum age is 21. In fact, in 17th Lok Sabha, the Lok Sabha which has now been dissolved, because right now we are in the 18th Lok Sabha. In 17th Lok Sabha, this Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2006 was sought to be amended so that the minimum age of marriage for both boys as well as girls will be kept at 21. But that bill lapsed upon the dissolution of the Lok Sabha, because that bill was originated in Lok Sabha. It was then referred to the standing committee, and then with the dissolution of the Lok Sabha, it got lapsed. Now Himachal Pradesh has amended, because laws related to marriage are under the concurrent list. So state legislatures can also make a law. Now Himachal Pradesh seems to have become the first state which has increased the minimum age of marriage for girls from 18 to 21. Clear? But now comes another point. National Family Health Survey 5. What does this report tell us? It tells us that close to 22% of marriages of girls happen before they turn 18. That means even when the minimum age of marriage for girls was 18, 22% of the marriages which takes place, the girl is less than 18. Now, if you are increasing the minimum age of marriage for girls from 18 to 21, this law, mere passing this law, will not eradicate the menace of child marriage in India. That's number one. Number two, what happens to these marriages where the boy is less than 21, child marriage, where the girl is less than 18, child marriage? Are these marriages illegal, invalid? No. These marriages are voidable. Now, what do we mean by voidable marriages? That means if a girl was married before attaining the age of 18, now once she has attained the age of 18, within 2 years of attaining the age of 18, age of maturity, she can complain and get this marriage annulled, declared void. That means marriage will be valid. But if after attaining majority, if after attaining the age of 18, within 2 years, you can get this marriage annulled, voided. That is what we say. These child marriages are not illegal marriages or voided marriages. These are voidable marriages. You can apply for these marriages to be cancelled. The bill that I was talking about, which lapsed upon the dissolution of the Lok Sabha, had tried to say that this marriage can be voided in 5 years. That means in 5 years after you attained majority, you can get these marriages voided. But there is another issue related to the Romeo-Juliet clause. What is this Romeo-Juliet clause? If we look at the data from the National Crime Records Bureau, it tells us that there is an increase in the amount of crimes committed by boys in the age group of 16 to 18 years. What does this data tell us? That there is an increase in the crimes committed by boys in the age group of 16 to 18. And majority of these crimes relate to rape. This is statistics, these are facts. But as you dig deeper, you realize that there is something else, there is something more than what meets an eye. And that has got to do with age of consent. What is the age of consent in India for girls? 18 years. That means when can a girl give consent to a sexual relationship? When she attains the age of 18. That means a girl less than the age of 18 cannot give consent to a sexual relationship. When she cannot give consent, that means if there is a sexual interaction, that is rape. And the courts have come down heavily on this. Because these boys, it is argued that they are in a consensual relationship with these girls, But since they are below the age of 18, they cannot give consent. But if they have had sexual intercourse with each other, then all these boys are booked under POCSO, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. And this, the court has said, is a Romeo-Juliet clause, because then you are criminalizing a consensual relationship. But since age is a factor, age is a matter of concern, you call it statutory rape. Even with the increase in the marriageable age of women from 18 to 21, will you then also increase the age of consent from current 18 to 21 years? If that happens, that is going to further increase the crime rate according to National Crime Records Bureau. But that won't be crime only, because that would be consensual relationship, which now the state has criminalized. So increasing the marriageable age for women, or for that matter decreasing it for men, is a very difficult issue to understand, and that requires a thorough understanding of the society. Mere changing a law does not change the society. But be that as it may, let's quickly go through two mains-based questions for your discussion. Question number 1, critically analyze the concept of absolutist free speech in the context of democratic societies. Discuss the implications for social harmony and the balance between individual rights and collective security. Freedom of speech and expression is sacred for the vibrant flourishing of a democracy. Because if there is no free speech, no political education is possible. And this political education is at the heart of a vibrant democracy. What is this political education? If I want to contest elections, should I not criticize the government for its policies? That's how you will vote for me. But what if I criticize the government? Basically, I'm educating you, saying these schemes of the governments are bad, these policies are wrong, these policies are pathetic. I'm educating you, politically educating you. But if I don't have free speech, then I can't politically educate the people. And then who will be at loss? Democracy. So free speech is very important. But it has to be within limits, reasonable limits. Why? Because does free speech allow hate speech as well? Can I start saying something spewing venom against communities, against different religious communities or tribal communities or linguistic communities or caste communities? What will happen to the social harmony then? So my freedom of speech and expression should have limits for the sake of social harmony. Because that's how we need to balance the individual rights and collective security of the people. What if I instigate people to raise arms and to overthrow the government? What if I incite people to violence? What if I incite people to disturb and violate public order? So my free speech has to be balanced with the collective security as well. Write an answer to this question. Question number 2, examine the significance of the Iran nuclear deal, also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in the context of the global non-proliferation efforts. Discuss the challenges and implications of the United States' withdrawal from the deal on regional stability and international diplomacy. How should India navigate its diplomatic and strategic interests in the light of the evolving situation? We are dependent upon Middle East for our energy security needs. We share cultural ties with Iran. We share historical connection with Iran and the countries in the Middle East. A stable Middle East is in the interests of India's security, energy security as well, and political security as well. And that is why this Middle East has to be safe. And that will only happen if all the different stakeholders in this region come on the negotiating table, discuss, debate, and iron out the differences that they have. Write an answer to this question, and if you have liked this analysis of today's the Hindu newspaper, Do not forget to press the like button, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and drop in your comments. Thank you so much. See you again next time. Till then, have a great time. All the best. Bye-bye.